Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started on the subcommittee for solid waste. We're a little bit behind time. We were supposed to start at 9, but it's 9:15 now, and we've got a lot to cover in 15 minutes. So to start, Representative Germana has just passed out some amendments to us that we can look at. I know there were some emails that were sent recently from Representative Potenza and Commissioner Wimsat we can discuss briefly. And then also, Chairwoman Aaron has some questions. She's not able to attend right now, but she might be here any moment. But I've got some questions of hers written down that I'll ask. But before we get to that, let's start off with Representative Potenza. If you have anything to say about your work and what you've got going on, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And everything has been put into place. All of the changes that I had sent out from the draft are all in. So there were a couple of, I'm gonna go through them. They're better on my computer than they are on the draft.
Real quick, while you're looking that up, when you say the draft, do you mean the copy that you handed out a week or so ago that has a kind of different typeface? It doesn't look quite like OLS, but it was drafted like OLS. Is that what you're referring to?
The one with the lines struck
Yeah,
through the
yeah,
text,
That
right?
has all been applied here in this
Okay,
draft.
so
This is an unapproved draft.
you're happy that everything that was in that draft did make it into this amendment?
Correct. Everything.
Okay.
I was here yesterday looking line by line to make sure that it was all done correctly as well.
Okay, I'll just blast through the real quick questions while you're looking that up. The Ford Act, is that in or out?
The what act?
The Ford Act, is that in or out?
That is still in, I
Okay.
believe.
You had mentioned previously you wanted to get rid of that. Do you have a reason why you kept it in or it was kept in?
Yeah, lines. It's on lines, page 3, lines 15, 16, 17. I just kept it in because it wasn't in my first round. That came afterwards, and since it's already here nor there. It didn't seem to make a difference, so I just kept it there. It's 2 lines.
Okay.
It's law. So.
Okay. Next question, 10 to the negative 5 or 10 to the negative 4?
10 to the negative 5.
Okay. And any reason why you kept that instead of switching to the negative 4, which you had mentioned previously?
I mentioned previously that was that's not my decision, and I didn't hear anybody telling me to do it. And 10 to the negative 5 was how the rules first came out. And yeah, they're more protective, and it's where we should be at. It's still a lot weaker than many other states surrounding. So,
if I may ask Representative Germana how you feel about that?
Yeah, I believe it should be 10 to the negative 5.
Okay. Okay. You don't feel that's too restrictive to get past or anything like that?
Well, when we spoke with the department last year when we were going through these bills, we have never been offered any evidence, empirical evidence, that 10 to the negative 5 is unworkable.
Okay. Okay. Good. And then one quick question, then I'll be done on my end. Does aquifer have any sort of a definition? If not in this bill, then in statute that we can link to? Because there's concern, the chairwoman had some concern that aquifer is a little too vague, and that there's a real definition of aquifer. It's not necessarily any body of water or any stream of water. So any thoughts on that?
Yes, so every time there was aquifer listed, it basically went to existing aquifer drawn drinking water wells. So pretty much every place that it talks about an aquifer, it then goes into aquifer drawn drinking water wells. So every single place that is referenced to that, except for like in the statement of purpose, it basically says in here, drinking water sources, our environment, including drinking water wells, perennial lakes, So, when it was like in a general, statement of purpose or description, but in every place where it's talking about specifics, it always says aquifer drawn drinking water
Yeah,
wells.
yeah. So it sounds like it qualifies that word a little
Correct.
bit.
Yep.
I'm not a legal scholar, so I don't know if that would be a problem or not. What are your thoughts, Representative Germana?
Well, yeah, I mean, that change makes sense to me. My concern is looking at the draft now, page 1, line 24, does say to any existing aquifer, comma, drinking water well,
did that.
comma, perennial river. So that didn't get changed to aquifer drawn drinking water well, which is a different thing. So that appears to remain as,
Yeah, in two
Aquifer.
places, OLS did not put that there, and then in two other places, they did. She said it was because of, grammatically. So I didn't fight with her yesterday on it. So I can tell them that I wanted exactly how I worded it.
Yep.
It was exactly how it was sent to all of you. So there's two places that say that. So, to be located sufficiently close to any existing aquifer drinking water well, she split it.
Yeah, it does. It seems like very different things there. It's like, and so that's where I'm concerned. I'm just wondering if there is, I don't know, but if there is anywhere in statute that we can link to that defines what an aquifer is, or if not, if we can put I mean, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but if we could put a definition of what an aquifer is in this bill, so that there's nothing, because the thing is we all really want this bill to go through, but my fear is, and maybe the fear of Chairwoman Aaron, is that if there's some sort of legal hangup that just causes a problem. One thing I will say is we're not going to exec this today. We've got one more week before we have to act on it. So if there's any little things we can flesh out, we definitely should do that.
Can I?
Please.
Yeah. So the definition of an aquifer is a body of permeable rock which can contain or transmit groundwater. So that's what that's the definition.
Do you
To
have
be
a,
honest, it shouldn't be a problem in having that in here like that, but I can just force OLS to go back to what I said. I mean, of course, you're not gonna be digging and putting a landfill in an area where it's gonna transmit in the groundwater, because groundwater is what goes into the drinking water wells. So, I mean, it's just basic water science.
Yep. Representative Germana, anything to say?
yeah, could we ask the director to, if what his view of this subject is? Have you been able to, should I phrase the question for you, or have you been able to piece it together
I
from
think
our?
I followed the discussion, yes.
Okay.
For the record, Mike Wimsat, Director of the Waste Management Division for New Hampshire DES. This issue of the use of the term aquifer in the bill is something that I believe I commented on the first time, at the first hearing for this bill. And my sense is that, and I think what I tried to convey then, and I think is important to understand, is that virtually all of New Hampshire is underlain by an aquifer of some sorts. We're blessed with relatively permeable soils and relatively fractured bedrock, so that almost anywhere you want to, if an individual residence wants to sink a well, and, to install a well and get enough water for one home, they can do it. That's not true for major public water supply wells. You have to look more carefully to cite those, because you need much higher yields for like a water system. But as Representative Potenza correctly pointed out, the term aquifer is very broad. It basically says any formation that can produce water. And again, in your first level hydrogeology class, when you're studying this particular subject, you learn that an aquifer is in the eyes of the beholder. If I have a well in bedrock, the bedrock under my house is pretty competent. I had to go several hundred feet to get water, but I got it, and I got enough for my house. So for me, that's a bedrock aquifer. So I think that it's a little, with respect, I think it's troublesome to use the term. I don't know that it really adds anything to the bill. And if you use that term, it is so broadly read that you could conclude that you can never cite a landfill anywhere because virtually everywhere in New Hampshire could be considered an aquifer.
I follow.
Yeah, please.
I just wonder if I would follow up. In your estimation, does the phrase aquifer drawn drinking water well, is that more appropriate in the text than the word aquifer?
I would say it's redundant. I think you could just say a drinking water well. Because if there's a well there and it's a drinking water well, it's clearly completed in an aquifer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Representative Potenza?
Yeah, I agree. It was just trying to be specific in there, and so, and it made it easier because anytime there was the aquifer, I had that in there. So, I believe it's 2 places where, that was done. So I think there's, we can make, these are very minor changes. We can make that so it's consistent throughout. So it'll either say, you know, drinking water wells, and it doesn't need to necessarily say aquifer at all in any place throughout the bill. So, do you have extras of these?
Yeah.
Could you give one to the director, please?
Okay. Real quick, do Representatives Gruber or Scully have anything they'd like to ask or add?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have a couple of questions. So on line, page 3, lines 18 to 24, this section has, in my mind, some very subjective wording, significant history, serious violations, and I'm wondering if that is too broadly worded or too open to interpretation. Who decides what's significant? Who decides what's serious? It also says continued willful noncompliance or unpaid fines. I could see situations where there would be certain companies that perhaps a fine is levied against them and they wish to contest it. I'm wondering how we, because maybe they think it's unreasonable or unwarranted, and so this type of language, in my mind, would mean that they're guilty until, you know, proven innocent. So I'm a little troubled with this whole section. Maybe we can tighten up the language on that. On that same page, lines 1, 2, 3, I'm assuming there's a practical reason why that's been put in there. Maybe it is just that you need to have somebody there all the time. I don't know. And maybe, you know, a landfill of any size is going to have that done. My question would be why it's put in there, or why it's needed. There was one other thing. Well, the only other thing I'm really concerned about, I get the 5-year distance of travel estimate. I think that, okay, so now we're putting in something that would give us sufficient time to detect and perhaps do something about it. The 1,500 feet now, we're back to doing something very prescriptive in terms of saying you can't have it within that distance. And if we're going with the 5-year time of travel, there could be certain scenarios I can imagine where you could be within 1,500 feet and still satisfy the 5-year distance of travel estimate. So I'd like to just really discuss why we're deciding on both a performance-based criteria and a prescriptive one. All right, thank you.
Representative Potenza, would you like to respond to that?
Yes, so for the first question, the reason why is because that's how it currently is in the rules, and so it's basically whichever is more protective. So everything was supposed to be site specific, and that's not how the current rules reflect that. So those are the changes that are made just from that. 500 is not enough, so that's why it's gone up to 1,500. It was at 3,000, which when the first map came out, because I think that's pretty important, you know, when when this first map came out, this was based upon 3,000, and we still had approximately 45% of the state where you could still cite a landfill. Yes, of course, you saw a lot of blue, but I think that that's very important to note because, and now I don't even know what that percentage is. So, in any case, let me go back to, so that's why it's like that in regards with setback in time of travel. Lines on page 3, lines 18 through 24, that has already been buttoned up, like extremely buttoned up. It was like 3 paragraphs long. That was very restrictive in regards with like fines and all of that kind of stuff. This means that you have to be a significant violator at that point. And who polices this? That would be the department. So they're the ones, of course, that are approving permits or not. And so already, if you look at lines 22 to 24, that's already part of their permit application. You can't have an active lawsuit or anything like that. So that's already part of where they would be denying a permit. So that's a given. And then the top is basically I took, 2 paragraphs of information and brought it down. And I wanted it to be, where, significant history of repeated serious violations, because of course violations happen, they get fixed. That happens all of the time. We're talking about, someone that's an abuser. And I think that it just, if you feel like that would need to be tightened up, if Director Wimsatt looked at this and had concerns, then I would definitely make some changes here. But I worked this a lot to try to make it so it wasn't where it could be frivolous. So,
Thank you for that explanation. I would be interested to hear what Director Wimsatt has to say about that language.
Thank you.
Then up at the top, the last question that you had in regards with having at least 1 employee contracted. Power outages, of course. They have a dialer system. This has been talked about on the other side of the aisle, saying that it's not necessary. We are talking about an operation that makes millions of dollars. There needs to be a person on site, because if the power goes out and that dialer doesn't work, which has happened, we have had where there is a spill that goes on over the weekend and you don't find out about it until Monday. So from that last person on site on Friday until Monday, you could have 3 days of incredible amounts of an accident. And it should not be much at all to have asking for 1 live employee on site.
Okay. We need to speed things up. Thank you so much for the answers and explanations. I do want to let Representative Gruber have his say, though.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Representative Potenza, for all these changes. The few areas that I had concerns with is the aquifer issue, and that's been adequately addressed with drinking water well, which is great. Also moving towards the performance-based system with the 5 years before it could get off-site I think is really a great way to deal with this, because there's so many variations of soils rather than a prescriptive distance and including that 10-mile radius with the landfill. So I'm satisfied with where we are now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And then one last thing for everybody. Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to say before we finish here? No? Oh. I just want to mention that it is possible we could either do that now or during a work session later when everybody's here. So I'll leave that up to Director Wimsatt if you'd like to speak now or wait until the work session.
It's at the committee's pleasure. I'm happy to answer the representative's question if he has one.
Representative Potenza, would you prefer his response to be now or later?
It's totally fine. I think it's fine.
Okay, let's
Did
do
you
it.
have a chance to just read the paragraph? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I think I understand what, and I guess, so I'm looking at page, for the record, looking at page 3, lines 18 through 24.
Correct.
Which set out some prohibitions on permitting for certain violations and other conditions. I guess the first thing I would say, again, we're not taking position on the bill. I'm asking because, I'm answering because I've been asked. But I think
Director, could you, or pull it
Oh,
forward?
sure, sorry about that. So on the lines 22 to 23, it just occurs to me that it isn't always under the control of an individual whether they're involved in litigation. Anyone can file a suit for any reason, and so to say that a permittee could not be, or an applicant could not be granted a permit because they were involved in litigation, it seems to me that's disadvantaging an applicant for something that they may not be able to control. So that's the only observation I would make about that. And then with regard to lines 18 through 19, where it refers to not issuing a permit for any applicant that has been found to have significant history of repeated serious violations, I certainly understand the intent there. And as Representative Potenza correctly pointed out, it would be the agency that would be implementing this provision. Not entirely clear to me, where the break point is for significant history of repeated violations, because these facilities are complex. It's possible to commit several violations over several days when in fact the applicant may be making best efforts to resolve things. So I'm a little, the only concern I would have about that is how we would decide in the event of a particular application where there was some compliance history, what constituted a significant history of repeated violations. And beyond that, I don't have any observations on that paragraph.
Representative Potenza.
Thank you, thank you, Director Wimsatt. I agree with you. I think that the agency they have their purpose, right? So of course there's a balance. The Department of Environmental Services, of course, is first and foremost to be protecting, the environment here for all of New Hampshire. And then of course we still have to have a balance with industry and all of that. I get it. I think that I trust the agency to be able to make that, those decisions, especially where, let's say it's a new actor, not somebody that we already have a history of, that's working here in the state, that has a horrible track record with the environment. Having that in there gives you that discretion. I think that's important. The second piece of that is the landfill-related litigation. I can make that more specific because I know that's already part of the permit right now. So I just want that, I want that in basically in rules. So however that could be worded to be more specific about where it's pretty much an automatic denial on your part right now. I wanted that to mirror that. So if that's not, that would be starting on line 22. So if that's not as clear, I'd be happy to clean that up a little bit. I thought it was enough because it was, landfill related litigation, but I can make that can be a lot more specific.
Thank you. I do want to point out and make sure the committee is aware, there are a couple provisions in law and in rule right now that go to this. One of them is that we're not to approve a permit unless we to deny a permit if we determine that an applicant does not have the requisite expertise, reliability, and integrity to operate a solid waste facility. That's in the rule. So we do implement that presently. And then also with regard to litigation, applicants required to sign a compliance statement. So part of that would be if there's an outstanding administrative order against the applicant, then they need to demonstrate how they're going to be in compliance with it, that they're either in compliance with it, or that if they are not, that by virtue of receiving an approval for the application, they would come into compliance with that order. So there are some provisions that they're not identical to these, but I don't want to tell you that, but there are some provisions in law and rule that go to this particular issue.
Okay, thank you. With that being said, I think now would be a good time to wrap it up. I'm real happy with the work that's been done, and we've got some good stuff we can tell during the work session. So with that, I'll close the hearing, and thank you, everybody.
On HB, my bill, the HB 707.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for waiting. I'm sorry we're late for our committee work session. I'd like to start the day with a Pledge of Allegiance led by Representative Freeman. Oops. Sorry. Kissing chairs. Yeah, kissing chairs. Okay, this morning we have ahead of us a work session, and we will be discussing a number of bills. Oops. Get myself situated here. Okay. So we're going to start out our discussion on HB 424, directing the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food to create forms for businesses to request information about service animals and establishing a committee to study the protection of business owners from requests to accommodate customers with fraudulent or untrained service animals. We had this hearing last week. Would anybody like to open discussion about this bill and what we heard? Representative Wheeler, good morning.
Morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for opening up the discussion. I think this bill presented a problem that needs to be addressed, but I'm not sure that the legislature, I'm actually positive that the legislature can't address this issue because of conflicts with the Americans with Disabilities Act on the federal level. Obviously, those conflicts, I think, are a little silly, and the specifics around the service dogs weren't well thought through when that legislation was passed, leading to some of the problems that were brought forward by the testimony. But other than potentially a study committee, and given the Speaker and the Senate President and the leadership's directive around study committees and wanting them not to move forward if unless absolutely necessary. I'm not sure this is the biennium for a study committee. So I think given the only way the legislature could move forward on a policy like this is to have a study committee that hones in hour after hour as to specifics around what the legislature could potentially do. I don't think that this legislation works, and I don't know if a study committee, given the, as I said, leadership's directive around study committees, is the right way to move forward. So maybe I would suggest, sadly, Representative String is a friend of mine, an ITL for this legislation, but I think that might be the right way to move forward. That's
Okay.
my piece.
I tend to agree with you. Thank you. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so I think that I might pose the issue of the problems with trying to do a study committee a little bit more strongly, which is that I think if we did a study committee, we would just find out what we already know right now, which is that we can't do anything. So ITL.
Okay, yeah. Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was also discussion before about potentially sending some sort of a letter or House resolution to our federal delegation. And I'm wondering, is that something that this bill could be amended to do, or is it something that would be better for him to just, we ITL this, and then next year, maybe Representative Stringham and others craft a House resolution?
Well, hold on one sec. I believe what we would need to do is ITL this bill, and Representative Stringham is certainly welcome to write a letter to the delegation, or, we can also write a letter to the delegation in tandem to that. I mean, we don't need to do anything legislatively. It's just Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I offered to draft up something
Correct. Now that I remember,
specifically,
yeah.
and I've already started that. So I would be happy to do that, and then it could be worked on by, of course, our committee, and then sent out a letter specifically to the federal delegation, pointing out some of these issues. I also think it's very important for us to lean on all of the tools that we currently have, the communication that comes out of the disability office, out of the governor's office, so the commission. I think that's really important as well. Those notices are very important too. I think telling people what questions they can ask and what their rights are for businesses. I think that's all very important, as well as always protecting that community as well. So you don't, I think that education is the key, and there's been a lot that's been done already. I think it's just a matter of making sure that we can utilize all those resources. But I think a letter is a great thing, saying, hey, can you guys button this up on the federal side?
Yep. Agreed. Any other questions or comments about HB 424?
I just wanted to
Representative Bixby.
support the idea of the committee sending a letter. I think that's a relatively low overhead approach to it, rather than having to put in a whole resolution and then go through the whole bill, the LSR bill, et cetera, process on it. Because I think that we have the information we need, and a letter from our committee would probably be sufficient.
Okay. Agreed. Okay. No further discussion on that. I'm going to move on to HB 250. We had a subcommittee meeting on that bill and came out with some language, which I submitted to OLS on Friday. And I just got the amendment back for HB 250, and unfortunately, they inserted the wrong bill language into that amendment. So I'm just now sending a letter to an email to OLS to fix it, because they've mixed up the two bills that were in OLS. So 250, HB 250 will not be available for us to exec today until they fix this. But basically, what we had for the change to the muzzle bill. Let me just pull up the language here that we came up with. Okay, let's see.
So while she's looking for that, I can just sort of give a little sense of the logic behind it. What we heard in the hearing was there was a concern that allowing the communities the general ability to regulate everything about muzzling might open it up to laws that were ordinances that would require muzzling of specific breeds and also muzzling of hunting dogs. And we saw that both of those were potential problems. What we did was we added some language referring to the definition of a vicious or vicious or whatever. There are three terms there. Dog that are it's already just defined in statute, and saying that muzzling, that they can make ordinances for dogs that are deemed to be vicious under this statute number.
Yep. So what we changed was the language. Okay. The language that they had here was adding in to RSA 466:39. City or town bylaws, the local governing body may make such additional bylaws and regulations concerning the licensing. They added the word muzzling into and restraining of dogs as it deems reasonable and may affix penalties, et cetera, et cetera. What we changed was, instead of inserting the word muzzling, we inserted the words muzzling of vicious dogs as defined in RSA 466:31. So that way we are restricting this, their ability to make any additional bylaws and regulations regarding the muzzling of vicious dogs. And there's a definition of what that is. So it makes this a little bit more clearer, a little bit more restricted, but also gives them the ability to do that. And that's what the amendment is, and that's what I had hoped to get back from OLS this morning. However, that didn't happen. So I am sending a letter out to Courtney Esbach to see if they can straighten that out. Maybe we can have that done today, I don't know. But if not, both this bill and the bill they mixed it up with, we will recess those, or this bill was supposed to be exec today on the list. We'll have to recess that till next week to have exec out. So that's where we are on HB 250. Any other questions or comments on that bill? Okay, seeing none. Moving on to HB 262, relative to group licenses for dogs. Any questions or comments about our hearing from last week?
Well,
Representative
I can
Bixby?
take this.
Sure.
From previously looking at the group dog license statute, I'm aware that there is a certain amount of disparity in terms of licensing fees. The licensing fee for, you can have a group license if you have 5 dogs or more. If you have 3 or 4 dogs, the sum of the fees for those dogs will exceed the amount of money that it costs to get a group license for 5 dogs to infinite number of dogs. So my initial thought was that this bill might address it. The bill was a mess. It didn't make any sort of numerical sense, and the bill sponsor didn't show up to explain what was going on or offer any sort of resolution. I don't think this is the kind of work we need to take on as a committee, even if we think that it might be a good idea. So I think this is just an ITL.
Okay, any other question or comment? Seeing none, and I agree with your assessment. Representative Bixby, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We heard last week also HB 401 relative to animal testing funded by New Hampshire state funds. Would anybody care to make any comment about that, Representative Germana? Sorry.
Either way. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to say very quickly, it seems to me the very definition of a solution in search of a problem. I don't think there's any reason to believe that we need to do this. And so absent that, I can't see anything other than ITO.
Thank you. I know that we have a federal Animal Welfare Act that our facilities have to comply with. And I think that federal Animal Welfare Act also takes care of what this bill is trying to address. Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, stealing my thunder. Thank
Oh.
you very much. That's okay. Nothing. While I wasn't physically at the hearing, I did watch it, and I was struck by the fact that no one could come up with any clear answers about if we're doing animal testing in New Hampshire. Is this a problem? So given that, I couldn't support legislation that, again, as Representative Germana stated, is, a solution looking for a problem. So again, if this becomes a problem in the state, naturally we should address it, but I don't think at this time that would be prudent.
And insofar as cosmetic testing, in New Hampshire, the only cosmetic company I know of is Badger, and I know that they are absolutely cruelty-free company. So, okay. Any other question or comment? Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the most interesting part of this bill was the record keeping requirements. The idea that if there is any animal testing, that they need to sort of alert the House or the Senate. I'm not too concerned about the animal testing because, like was brought up in public hearing, we don't really know if that happens. But when it comes to just regular animal testing, I personally would be shocked if there wasn't something like that going on in the biology department or some department of one of the universities. I mean, when I was at university, I didn't do it personally, but I visited these labs and, there's a lot of animal testing going on. So it would be, I suppose, nice to know if that was happening in the state of New Hampshire, that we had a way to look and figure out and kind of at least understand what's going on and then worry about if we want to do something about it. Unfortunately, a lot of this bill contains stuff that, like Representative Germana said, is sort of a solution in search for a problem. I would hope that if we do ITL this, that maybe the sponsor will bring it back another year and narrow down the focus to just learning more about what sort of animal testing is going on in the state, and then maybe doing something about that, and not have so much language specifically just about product testing, which may not even be happening.
Thank you. Representative Bixby.
Yes, so as it stands right now, excuse me, as it stands right now, any institution that is getting federal money for doing research that involves animals is required to have an institutional animal care and use committee, and the proceedings of the Animal Care and Use Committee are public records, and you can request information from the IACUC of any institution that's doing research that involves animals, and that that is available as a public record right now. I don't know exactly whether there's already a website that is up that sort of lists everything that they're doing, but that is public record. It is available right now.
Okay, thank you, Representative Bixby. Any other? Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had an extensive conversation with some of the people that were here testifying, sponsor, co-sponsor. And although I like the idea of saying not New Hampshire, and that's that piece. I think coming to the committee, I think it was very important for them to at least have basic information. And that information is available. So, for example, any single, even private business here, corporation in New Hampshire that is doing any sort of animal testing at all, they have labs, all of that stuff has to be licensed. So I said, have you, go to DHHS, find out whoever's doing, not necessarily for any product testing, but whatever kind of testing that they might be doing. And that would include, of course, the federal piece with the university stuff. That's easy to get that kind of information in regards with the federal stuff. So I recommended that they would do that immediately and get that kind of information to say, okay, well, we know for fact there's 10 facilities that are doing animal testing on X, Y, and Z. That would be really good information to have that the committee would have. So I asked them to follow up with that type of information. I know we do pass bills that make a statement. The reporting mechanism, I don't agree with either. I don't think it kind of makes sense. But I do, it would be nice to know what's going on in New Hampshire. So, I don't think this bill is ready for prime time yet. I think we need the data, and it would be really nice to have that kind of information. And I think that's something that hopefully the bill co-sponsors would be willing to gather that and provide that to the committee to move forward with something if it's necessary. I don't think there's a problem with saying, hey, we don't want that in New Hampshire. There's many other states. As the kid governor came here and testified as well, we don't want any sort of unnecessary product testing on animals. There's a lot of companies that are very much against that, of all that ethical treatment. And so it'd be nice to have a statement, but I think there has to be more work done in this space and just more research and information that we could have.
Thank you. Representative Howard.
I thought that our researcher did a pretty exhaustive search, right, to find any evidence that was out there. So, and I think that also in the testimony, they had also done research. So, I really think that it's making a statement about something that's just not happening would be sort of a waste of our time. So.
Thank you. Representative Bixby.
So I think that some of the laws that are in other states restricting cosmetics that have been tested on animals I think that what that is done what's done in those states, or at least some of them, is to have a ban on sales of products, and which would essentially not make it, just something that's produced in the state, but something that's produced in another state, but sold into the state. And there are third-party organizations that certify products as being not tested on animals, et cetera. If another bill that had this general purpose was to come forward, I think that it would make more sense to look at those other states that have a ban on sales and do it in terms of a sales ban rather than for things that are tested on animals, rather than trying to figure out what's being, how the animal testing might be happening in New Hampshire or not. I think that that's also a bill that would probably end up going to Commerce rather than us. So. Which also means that we can't amend this bill to do that, because we had another bill that would have moved it into Commerce territory last year, and we weren't allowed to do that. So.
Okay. Any other question or comment regarding this bill? All right, seeing none, I think we're going to move on. The next bill is HB 616. Relative to the confiscation of animals from persons suspected of or charged with abuse of animals. We had testimony from our hearing, we had input from various parties on this. And
So just out of,
Representative Bixby.
yeah, so, the incorrectly produced, amendment, does that actually have the most current language for 616 in it?
I haven't looked it over, but it looks like it does.
Okay, so it might make sense to pass that
I
out
can-
with the caveat that is in fact, not the right bill
It's
number,
not
but
the
it would
right-
give us the right stuff to discuss.
Yeah, so if we want to talk about it, sure. So let me pass half this way, half that way.
Maybe run one back.
Yeah. Yeah. Give one to the Commissioner Jasper, please. Okay. Okay, just bring up,
Madam Chair,
yes.
are you gonna,
If we have any extra copies, please give one to Mr. Johnson in the back. So we're not voting on this today, but I want everybody to see we had incorporated changes that the commissioner has requested, as well as changes that from testimony. And I mean, we can kind of give you a moment to look through it, and if you have any questions, we can discuss it. Sure. Representative King, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 2, lines 17, it says no confiscated animal shall be altered prior to conviction. And I'm just wondering if we're going to be able to have any sort of language that would also deal with euthanization. You know, I know that it was claimed that, you know, if an animal had been seized and was suffering, that they would euthanize it, which seems very drastic to me. I'm just wondering if there was anything that could be done to protect against that.
As I understand, part of being altered would also include euthanasia. So that's an extreme alteration. Representative Potenza.
just a quick question on that. Was that already in 17, line 7, page 2, line 17 through 19? Was that in the original, or is that part of the amendment? I'm trying to remember if the no confiscated animal shall be altered prior to a conviction for abuse or neglect under this section without the notarized authorization of the owner from whom the animal was confiscated. Was it worded like that in the original, or was that, that wasn't in there at all?
It was not in there at all.
Okay, because I know we talked about, that's perfect. I like that language a lot.
Where? Oh, Representative King, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair, are you happy with the language that OLS has done, or do you feel that there's still any more work that needs to be done or changes that needs to be made to what they've done?
I think that this looks fine insofar as incorporating the comments that we've had from the commissioner and Farm Bureau, as well as folks from the animal protection section. Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at, on page 1, line 13, and I was just wondering if that could be clarified. It says, "No animal shall be confiscated unless a person is charged under this section," in line 14, except when the officer believes that the animal's life is in danger. So my question is do they have sole discretion there? Does a veterinarian have to be called in? Because it doesn't look like that. It just says except when. So I just want a little bit of clarification on that line, if I could, please.
Okay, so the line above it indicates that an investigating officer would be accompanied by a state veterinarian or their designee who shall set probable cause criteria. So I would imagine that the investigating officer would have someone with them to advise them as to whether the animal's life is in danger or not.
I understand that, but it does say except. And so that is where I'm questioning.
That the except is in cases, I guess, of protective custody. Commissioner, would you like to come up and perhaps clarify that or suggest where we may add some language or something?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I think you do have to give the officer that discretion, and he would have to justify at a later time why he believed the animal's life was in danger. You are not going to be able to get the state veterinarian or his designee 24/7, 365 days a year. There are going to be times, and even if somebody was going to come, say, from 2 hours away, if he was in a situation where he believed that that animal's life was in imminent danger, I don't think any of us would want to say, oh, well, just leave him there to die. Without the exception language, that is what you're doing.
Okay.
So that's why I suggested that language, recognizing there are going to be extenuating circumstances. The officer would have to justify later why he believed that to be the case.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, when you were just speaking, you said a key word there, and I think it would be important, imminent. And I think that really needs to be put in there. Would you have objection to that?
I certainly don't have any objection. And Madam Chairman, while I'm at the table, I think that in the drafting of this amendment, everything relative to the parimutuel and the racing is no longer in the amendment and would stay in law. So if you just double check on that, because there seems to be something there unless I'm missing it, but the
Okay,
language.
I will double check
All right,
that.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on one second. And you wanted to include, say, imminent danger? Okay. Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So line 14 will go, I just wanted to clarify. So believes that the animal's life is in imminent danger. Perfect. And then is there a way to connect the two? So no animal shall be confiscated unless a person is charged under this section, except when the officer / state veterinarian or their designee believes that the animal. Can you qualify the officer with the vet in that, or is that just automatically known because it's mentioned previously?
I think it's mentioned
Okay.
previous.
All right.
I think there are actually two aspects to that. One is it's because it's in the sentence right before that they're doing it under the advice. That's fairly clear. The other is that in terms of actually making the determination, it has to be the law enforcement officer because the state vet does not have.
That's right, has that authority.
Policing
We get
powers.
that.
Policing powers, yeah.
Representative
Mike,
Howard?
I have
Oh, okay, one
one
more.
other piece. So it's page 2, lines 20, 21, and 22. I think that the changes here are great. I think that's missing one piece. There is, so besides a soliciting of donations, if no one has been charged with a crime and an entity that was involved in confiscating animals is putting it out there on their website or social media, basically convicting that person, which causes threats and all of these other things that happen, because of course it's the court of public opinion. Is there any way to have a sentence in there that's not just solicit donations, but correct, that are basically, convicting these owners, impugning these owners before they were even charged or anything like that? Like before, I don't know, that to me is just as bad. I mean, it was clear that the situations that we heard, and I've heard of others, of the level of threats that came from outsiders in the community was horrible. I mean, it'll destroy people's businesses and livelihoods, dox a family. That's just not okay, especially if there was no conviction, nothing was set in stone. There's no, to try to protect that while due process and the whole thing is going on. Nobody should be able to take investigative information, put it online, and then have the public go after them with pitchforks.
Right. So actually, there is another section that addresses that, which is on page 3, line 18. In order to protect the integrity of complaint investigations, an appropriate law enforcement officer shall require any person or their designated agent called upon to take possession of any animal seized or to assist during any complaint investigation to sign a binding non-disclosure agreement intended to protect any shared or confidential information against unauthorized use pending the final adjudication or dismissal of such complaint, providing that the information may be disclosed only to officials with a need to know who are subject to confidentiality obligations. So that basically that basically gets at exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah. Representative Scully?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. This is definitely going in the right direction. So is there any functional difference between confiscation of an animal taken into protective custody? I see the words used, in confiscation in one place and protective custody in another.
So as I understand, protective custody is a more immediate action where the animals are taken right away. This is in the case of if the owner is not around or not home, confiscation. So protective custody is a form of confiscation. Let's put it that way.
Okay, may I ask one other question, please?
Yes.
Now, again, I have to read this again carefully, but I did have a question. I don't know if we have any prohibition regarding allowing the person who files the complaint from also participating in the investigation, whether that would constitute a conflict of interest.
Yeah, that
Okay,
was,
that's on page 3, line 14.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for pointing that out.
Representative Germana?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, pardon me. Gosh, can't get rid of this cough. So I have a question about page 2, lines 17 to 19 that Representative Potenza referred to earlier. And this is a process question. I'm just trying to think through. I understand the purpose of this section. So no confiscated animals shall be altered prior to conviction. I think there's a consensus that euthanizing an animal fits under, you know, that term altered. But here's my question. Thinking about how long it can take to get a conviction of somebody. And if we're talking about somebody, of course, someone is not guilty until proven, or is not, guilty until they're proven innocent. But if there is an animal, pardon me, if they're, well, I'm saying that they're not presumed guilty, right? So we can't assume that. But if you have a case where an animal, as judged by, maybe it could even be a couple of different veterinarians or whatever, if an animal's in really, really bad shape, I would hate to think that an animal would have to continue suffering throughout the entire length of proceedings until a conviction is secured. And you may have a case of legitimate abuse where an animal is really, really suffering. And by the time you get to a conviction, I'm assuming it could be many weeks or months. So I don't know if it's possible. I hate the idea, but that's what concerns me, is that we may have animals who are deeply suffering. And if there's a way to say that maybe 2 veterinarians or whatever might concur that euthanasia is an appropriate step to take, that's my only concern. It's not about assuming anyone's guilty. It's just a concern for an animal who may be really suffering and may have to suffer for weeks or months.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think when we're dealing with animal cases, the court hearing has to be expedited. So they get a quicker court hearing than, just you or I. We have, that is in our RSAs, that they have to be heard very quickly so that then a judge is already involved within, I think it's 7 to 14 days.
All right, thank you very
And-
much. That
and-
helps
and
a lot.
Representative Bixby.
Just a caveat about that, and I think that maybe the commissioner might want to weigh in on this, because I think he might know this a little bit more thoroughly than I do. But I believe that what is required within 15 days is a status hearing, and that does not actually establish, that doesn't establish the final conviction. It just is a way of figuring out what should be happening with the animals. And I'm not sure what it's been a while since I've really looked at this carefully, so I'm not sure what entirely is covered under the status hearing. Could you clarify that for us, Commissioner?
I don't have any particular knowledge of the status hearing. What I can tell you is that once an animal is seized, the original owner is no longer in charge of that animal. We have the cost of care fund, which has criteria set out for how much money that we can expend for that animal. And I don't have all of it in front of me. My understanding is that if an animal is suffering and is not in a position where we can relieve that suffering, the animal will be euthanized, because at that point, it is not anyone else's property. It has become the property essentially of the state. And so animals are not allowed to suffer in that situation. The animals that we can care for during that period and can be, rehabilitated if necessary will be. But animals that are in a state of suffering would be euthanized.
And in this paragraph too, it also says that you would have to get notarized authorization from the owner. So if the animal is suffering and they want to euthanize it, they would talk to the owner of the animal, and I would imagine proceed with getting the notarized authorization to do so. Representative Potenza?
Yeah, I think that what you just said is key, because from listening to the testimony, with some of the animals that were put down that weren't necessarily in distress, they were only in distress because, they were nursing, that kind of thing. So I think that the piece there that you're talking about is important, because maybe that is where a solution comes in, where I can take care of my animals. You don't need to euthanize them, that type of thing. So in regards with that notarization piece, that approval. So there was another question that Representative Scully had, and I just wanted to answer that. I'm not sure if you were part of the hearing where the protective custody piece. So for example, I didn't realize this too, that sometimes if somebody's sick, an owner could die or something like that, and the animals are left in a home, that piece there, that protective custody. So I know they're sometimes used interchangeably, but where the department or law enforcement is coming in to take animals, sometimes it's just because, God forbid, the owner could be in a car accident or something like that could happen. So then the animals are taken care of, fed and things like that, not home alone and that kind of piece. So there's that part of that type of protective custody where it's just unforeseen circumstances that take place.
Okay. Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to get back to the questions Representative Germana raised because I think it is an important one. The answer we just kind of got was that, well, you can get authorization from the owner, but that assumes that the owner has the animal's welfare in mind. If it's an abuse case, the owner might not give the permission because he was abusing the animal anyways, and so just let it keep suffering. So that is a problem I see, and I thank you for bringing that up. In regards to this, the commissioner sort of answered in a legalistic way as far as who has custody, but I'm curious, a lot of the changes that we're seeing in this amendment, my understanding is that they were done with input from the commissioner, so I'm curious if the commissioner had anything to do with this line, and if so, what his thoughts are on it, not from a legal necessarily point of view, but just from a practicality point of view.
Thank you. And if I may, when I gave the answer, I wasn't thinking of new 9. I was aware of it. I don't fully support this because the previous owner has had that right taken away from him. But if the committee feels strongly about this, then I would implore you, just for the reasons that you heard, to add except in the case of a court order, because obviously these animals were not well cared for, and you're exactly right that somebody may say, no, you continue to deal with them. So I think there needs to be the opportunity for the state to move forward and say, this animal needs to be put down for its own welfare. And so
Representative Bixby.
So, I'm not sure if you have the answer to this right in front of you, but so in current law, after there's been that status hearing, there's a line 5 in so Roman 3A number 5 is no custodian of an animal confiscated under this section shall spay or neuter or otherwise permanently alter the confiscated animal in his or her custody pending the final disposition of the case, unless a treating veterinarian determines that such procedure is necessary to save the life of the animal. So that's current law. Does line 9 here replace that, or is it added to that?
I am not sure. As I said, I'm not the biggest fan of Section 9. I think that, the current law probably covers that. And frankly, I was not thinking of the altered, including euthanasia. I certainly see how that could be interpreted that way. So again, if you're going to leave that and that's the interpretation, let's not make something else subject to debate. Because we know, although the committee may feel that way, you end up to court and, could be,
Right.
Euthanasia is not altering the animal, it's euthanasia, but.
Right. So
think we'd make
in
it a little-
terms, so you think that in terms, for clarity, we should add euthanasia specifically there, and we should also add something about a court order potentially being an alternative if the owner is being really uncooperative and it's really medically necessary.
I would agree with that, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, can we hear from maybe Chief Suckling from Alexandria or Sheriff Wright from Belknap? I know they're here. I wonder if they have something to add to this conversation.
Sure. Please have a seat and introduce yourself. Let us know who you are and where you're
Thank you so
from.
much. I appreciate being heard today. So my name is Dave Suckling. I'm the chief of the Alexandria Police Department. Thank you very much for the mild introduction. I'm on the Governor's Commission of the Humane Treatment of Animals. I'm currently getting appointed to that. I'm in the process of that, but I've been appointed to that by the New Hampshire Chiefs of Police Association. And I speak also for the New Hampshire Chiefs of Police Association while I'm here today. We oppose this bill, and I can go through why. We just got handed the new one, so I'm a little bit on the back foot with this morning, but I will tell you a few things. I've been involved in animal cruelty cases since the day that I started in law enforcement. There's only one thing more emotional in law enforcement, and it's probably domestic violence. People are very passionate about their animals, and I understand that completely. And because of that, people also don't see the degradation of their animals that we see when we arrive on scene for the first time. I've worked livestock cases. I've worked animals, cats and dog cases. I've worked a lot of them. And you guys were asking before about the process through the courts and how it takes a long time. I'll just highlight a case that we did 2 weeks ago, probably, I think now. We took a dog from a house. We were there to serve some paperwork on the owner, and the dog came out of a kennel, and it was terrible. It was a Rottweiler. It was about, I don't know, 20, 30 pounds underweight. We seized the dog immediately on the spot. It had no water. It was living in 10 degrees and minus temperatures. It's pretty apparent to us pretty quickly what a abused dog looks like, or an unfed dog looks like. We seized the dog. We didn't arrest the person at the time, which is contrary to what you guys are suggesting in this bill. And there's a reason for that. We're a small police department. There's 2 of us, and our job that day was.
Yeah, so this bill is dealing mostly entirely with livestock, so I don't
Yes.
know where,
It's coming.
and can, Representative Comtois has a question for you.
Yes, you mentioned that you are working on getting appointed to the Humane Commission, but are you testifying on their behalf?
No, I'm
it's-
not. I'm just telling you
just-
that I've been
ju-
appointed to that
ju-
by the
just wanna
Chiefs
make
of
sure
Police
that people-
Association. No, I'm definitely not. But my point was I've been appointed to that by the Chiefs of Police Association. That was my
Right,
point.
but I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to make sure that everyone on the committee and in the audience knows that you are not speaking on behalf of the commission.
No, I'm definitely not. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody has a question for,
Can I talk about an animal cruelty case that I did that was livestock, if you'd rather me talk about that? Because it's relevant. It's very relevant to what you're talking about. You're talking about seizing animals without an arrest being made. We've done that many times, and we have to sometimes because we're such a small agency. And most of the agencies,
yeah, Representative Freeman?
yes.
Madam Chair, while I appreciate the chief coming in front of us, I do believe that this is a work session and not a hearing. So I think we need to keep within those parameters in order to find a solution. I would love to ask the chief any questions, and I
Please.
think there's many on this committee who would like to, but I think it's important that we stay along those lines.
Yes, I agree. And so certainly if anybody has any questions for, I'm sorry, I missed your name?
Chief David Suckling. You can call me David. It's
Chief,
fine.
yeah,
Yep.
for Chief David Sackman. Please, we can ask them now. Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question. So you haven't been able to read the changes that were made?
I had read the one before today. I'm not sure which version that was, and I apologize for that. But I haven't read much of the one today.
So my question is, can you give a specific example of where you think there are some problems with this bill from an experience? So let's say you just said you had a livestock experience. So speaking directly to the bill, where do you see an inherent problem right now?
One of the parts of the bill that I see a problem, and I think it's in the new part. Like I said, I've just had 10 minutes with it. Is assuming that there's a theft if we take an animal without charging someone. That's hamstringing us. That's really. I think you guys are looking for law enforcement to be involved in animal cruelty, and I think that's almost threatening in a way to us that if we don't arrest someone at the time, then that could be considered unauthorized taking. We don't like that.
Okay, Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, thank you, Chief Suckling, for coming before us.
Thank you.
Does the language in the first section, line 14, around except when the officer believes that the animal's life is in danger, does that at all alleviate any concerns that you or your organizations have around not being able to have the discretion you need in these cases where,
I
as you
think that
described?
works for us. Generally speaking, it gives us some exigent circumstances that we can work around. Yes.
So it might, if I could, Madam Chair.
Sure.
It might move you from being opposed to this bill to maybe being neutral and not taking a position.
You're talking about a small part of a larger bill. I would say this part of it is adequate.
Representative Comtois, you had a question? No, you're good. Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually had the same point as Representative Wheeler, but I also wanted to comment that the difference between the last bill and this one is that the big gap that got closed was in precisely the lines that we're talking about. And so you might want to take a closer look, because I think that I had the same problem that you did before, that there seemed to be some steps missing and some things that were out of order. And I really think that these lines solve that problem.
Okay.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
As I see it in lines 17 to 19 on page 2 regarding confiscating animals, no confiscated animal shall be altered prior to conviction for abuse, etc. That section needs some work, so we'll have to work on that. Representative Potenza.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon what the commissioner stated, and I don't want to put words in your mouth wherever he is, that can be fixed in regards, we can keep that, and the wording can change by just adding a court order. Basically, a court order would trump in a sense, the notarized authorization, correct? That's what I was hearing from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Representative Scully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, speaking to that clause, I would say except in the case of a court order, no confiscated animal shall be altered. I think I'd like to see or euthanized in there, just so there's no, how would one say it? Ambiguity. That's exactly the word. Thank you very much. I would point out, I think this is very important, because if somebody was being charged with animal cruelty, I could see them withholding authorization to euthanize an animal, because they might consider that proof of the fact that they were conducting animal cruelty. So the court order is a very important addition.
Okay. Representative Howard, and then Potenza. Oh, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam
You still
Chair.
have your hand up. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to take it personally that I put my hand up a half dozen times. but
Sorry.
It is what it is. People don't look over this way. What I'm
My
hearing everybody-
apologies.
No, not necessary. What I think might help us address that issue with euthanization is on line 31, page 1, no custodian of an animal confiscated under this section shall spay or neuter or otherwise permanently alter the confiscated animal in his or her custody pending final disposition of the court case unless a treating veterinarian deems such a procedure necessary to save the life of the animal, or in the case of imminent suffering, euthanasia. So that might address what our concerns are about it, make it a little cleaner and a little more succinct. Thank you.
So you would add in the words, or in the case. Okay, got it. Representative Howard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little bit confused by getting notarized authorization from the person who has committed the, negligence or abuse in order to take these next steps. So I'm just wondering if that's the person that we need to get the final word from.
Well, yeah. Representative Comtois, you had a comment?
I did, based on what Representative Howard was saying, because as we know, we just had a case where animals were confiscated. And, you know, if someone doesn't know, the owner doesn't notarize that, and sometimes the owner understands the animals better. And so I'm a little concerned about that, but I think with the cleaning up of a lot of this, it will help mitigate that portion of it. But I think it's important to note that, except in, like, as Representative Freeman said, extreme suffering, you know, the owner should have a say, because we're innocent until proven guilty. And we have to go under that assumption if we're going to follow the law.
Representative Bixby and then Potenza.
So I think one thing that is still a little bit unclear is the difference between confiscation and and protective custody. And as both as it stands in current law and as it is, this amendment is written, they are distinct things, but it is not actually defined anywhere really outright. This is what confiscation is versus this is what protective custody is. I think we might want to include in a definitions section in this chapter a definition of custody, protective custody, and a definition of confiscation, just so that is really clear when it's being read. Because when an animal is taken into protective custody, it is not yet confiscated. It is still under in section 2, unless charges have been filed, or this is lines 33 and 34 on page 2. Unless charges have been filed or a warrant establishing probable cause has been issued, the animal or animals shall be returned to the owner or their designee or caretaker upon request. So that, so at that point, if charges are then filed or there's a warrant for probable cause, that at that point, the protective custody gets converted to confiscation. And which ties into what's happening on page 3 in line 24. The confiscation of any animal or animals without a charging of the owner or caretaker, or without a warrant specifying probable cause under paragraph 4 shall be theft by unauthorized taking. So that's where where there needs to be, so the common sense understanding of confiscation is different from what is actually happening in the law. I think having some definitions at the beginning of the section might help clarify that.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am very much afraid you are going to make perfect the enemy of good, or however that phrase goes. When we had our meeting months ago, that's when I suggested there are a lot of problems in this section that we need to have a study committee, but there are things that are very important now. And I think, and that's why I'm not a big fan of putting 9 or 10 in even at this particular time. I think you need to focus on fixing the problems. And you just heard from the chief, and clearly that's where the problem was in Lee. They don't understand that you can't seize an animal now without filing charges, and that the protective custody, even though not as well defined, but in your fix does define it better. It always said you have to leave the notice where they can. You don't do that if somebody is there. And so I think it was always clear in the law to most people that was there. But now we get into these definitions. This should be the purpose of the study committee. All these other actual issues should be what you put in the study. Please, I'm imploring you to fix the problems that exist now. Don't try to fix everything now, or you are going to lose this, maybe not in the House, but you send it to the Senate and you're probably going to lose it and they're just going to go with the study committee. We need fixes to happen now. I just would say, please, keep the fixes simple.
Okay. Sure, just question.
Okay, I think that I appreciate your thoughts on that, and I think that this could in fact wait for the study committee.
Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I still think it's important to have, I did another bill. Definitions, I think, are key. So having certain things defined in there. So for example, so we wouldn't have to, places where it talks about being altered, that includes, of course, euthanasia. So I think having those types of definitions in there are important. Not having, taking the commissioner's point, if we're going to leave some things out because we're trying to bite off too much at this point, I get it. But I think that having right out in the beginning some definitions is really helpful. And it also helps to have less words. So if altered means all of those things, then you don't need to say, and we already know that it means all of those things, but I think it's good to have those definitions that are in there.
Thank you. Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With all due respect to the commissioner, I respectfully disagree. I think we're really close on this, to be honest. And I feel like, I'm not the one doing the heavy lifting, but I just feel like with all the notes that have been taken, all the work that we've put into the things that need to be changed, I feel like within the week, OLS could put them in there. And I think by next week, I think this could be solved. And I think if we had a study committee, the amount of time and effort that study committee would have to do to catch up to what we've already done and the legwork we've already done in this committee, I feel like that would be kind of sad. So for me, I personally would prefer we just forge on and see if we can get this done by next week. And if we can, great. If not, if you really feel like at the end of next week, it really does need still a lot of work, then maybe. But, worst case scenario, and I don't think we should rely on it because I think we should feel confident about the bill before we pass it. But if we passed it and it went to the Senate and then we found out, oh, there's one little tweak here or there, Senate could fix it. And, it does happen where sometimes something will pass the House and then the sponsor goes to the Senate and says, vote this down because I found things that are wrong with it. That does happen too. So I personally, I think it would be sad if we sent this to a study committee and lost so much of
This
the good we've
actually
already
has
done.
a study committee included in the language.
Okay, but all the work that we've already put into it, I don't think we should give up on that.
No. Representative Bixby.
So I had a comment which the chair already made for me.
Oh, sorry.
And no problem. And I have a question for the chair in her role as the prime sponsor of the amendment, which is how much of a lift is it for you to do some or all of the things we've talked about? I don't want this to sort of be an infinite regress of just adding one more thing and one more thing and one more thing. I think some of the things we've talked about probably are not a very heavy lift. I just want to get a sense of where you are in terms of what makes sense to do now and what.
Yeah, well,
could be put off.
the things that we talked about, putting in fixes for, with a imminent danger and talking about, well, we have to look at section 9 a little bit for the wording, but I don't know how comfortable I am in putting in definitions right now. I think that's something that with the study committee that's included in this bill, we can refine at some point later on when we do the study committee.
That sounds good to me. And another thing to remember is that when we do the study committee, if we look at it again and decide that what we wrote this week is not as concise or perfectly worded as it needs to be, that's something we can take up with the study committee. But we need to have some changes now in order to make sure that we don't have a a 1-year lag in terms of getting these protections into place.
I agree. Representative Wheeler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to overstep my bounds here as a freshman on this committee, but I do see that we're only 5 minutes under an hour on this discussion with 5 minutes left, 5 bills left, and
Yep.
only 20 minutes left on the
I
work
would like to
session.
move on. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have a good amount of, some things that needed some editing, so I will take care of those. And of course, we have the issue of it not being the right proper amendment to the proper bill. So, and anyway, thank you all for your work and comments on this, and we will move on to HB 152, prohibiting the sale and use of adhesive rodent traps. I don't know, we've kind of talked about this already. I don't know that anybody's really changed in their view of this, so.
I think we don't need to
Representative
talk about it more now. We'll
Yeah.
have a vote in an hour or so, and what happens will happen.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to HB 251, the infamous squirrel bill. I have an amendment that was sent out by Representative Spillane, and I'm going to pass it along to everybody. There's 2 pages here. Please take one of each. One is the law regarding Fish and Game, and the other is, and can I have a copy too? And the other is the section 201:14, and the other is the amendment that he's offering up. And pretty much what I want to say about this is that the amendment that Representative Spillane is offering up is at least to allow people who have raccoons and gray squirrels who are moving into New Hampshire, if they have them as pets already in another state, that if they move into the state, that they may bring their pets with them to the state of New Hampshire. It reads, raccoons and gray squirrels may be possessed as companion animals without a permit from the department if a person relocates from a state with a raccoon or gray squirrel, where it is legal to keep a raccoon or gray squirrel so long as such animal is up to date on any vaccines required. The raccoon or gray squirrel shall not be confiscated or euthanized without the permission of the owner. Nothing in this paragraph shall be construed as enabling or trapping, breeding, and sale of raccoons and gray squirrels. So this would go into the Fish and Game general provisions, import, possession, or release of wildlife. And so I'd like to open up some discussion. I'm actually fairly okay with this. I think this takes out the piece having to do with Fish and Game rehabilitation, and if they can't rehabilitate the animal, to set it back into the wild, where they would be able to give it out for adoption to someone else. So that piece has all been cut out. All this allows for is for someone who has a raccoon or gray squirrel as a pet in a state that allows that if they are moving to New Hampshire, they can bring their pet with them. So, Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 things. One is that the amendment says, so long as such animal is up to date on any vaccines, and I'm just wondering if that should also include some sort of provision for staying up to date on vaccines. And then the other question I have is really just sort of a question to throw out there, and that is, I definitely support the idea that, you're moving from out of state, you come in, you don't have to give up your animal, but it does put us in this weird sort of potential legal limbo that, people moving from out of state have more rights than natives. And I'm just wondering if that's even constitutional. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I just thought it would be an interesting topic. Thank you.
Representative Comtois.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. When it says up to date on any vaccines required, are they required to have a rabies vaccine? Because I think different states could have different vaccine requirements, but I think with New Hampshire, rabies is always required. So, Mike.
I don't know. Representative Scully. And then Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had said earlier, personally that I think trying to let people legally own raccoons is a non-starter for me because of the fact that they are bigger, more dangerous, and they also have a much higher chance of being infected with rabies. And I believe the testimony before our committee was that there is no vaccine schedule for these animals because they're considered wild animals. And it does seem weird that we would give special rights to somebody moving into the state when we're saying you can't have these animals, to the people of New Hampshire who actually live here. So I think I love Representative Spillane's heart's in the right place, but I would not vote for the base bill, and quite honestly, I wouldn't vote for this amendment either.
Okay, thank you. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, so,
Oh, I'm sorry, Howard. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. He stole one of my points, and that is the vaccination. There is no schedule. There is no requirement. There isn't even one that's made for them. So that's a problem there. I also think that the proof of where the origins of your pet ship of these animals, whether it happened on another side of the border or inside our borders, it would be a hard thing to prove.
Thank you. Representative Bixby and then Representative
So
Minor.
I'd like to thank the chair for handing out a copy of current statute, and where it says at the beginning of the section, import, possession, or release of wildlife. No person shall import, possess, sell, exhibit, or release any marine wild species, live marine species or wildlife or the eggs or progeny thereof without first obtaining a permit from the executive director, except it's permitted under Title 18. The executive director shall have the authority to determine the time and any other conditions governing the issuance of the permit. The chief of the Wildlife Division shall respond to the request for a permit within 60 days of submission for a final request, and there's a capacity for appeal. So there is a mechanism existing in law for those small number of individuals who do want to bring a wildlife into the state that they have in their possession. So the procedure exists. It has the oversight. I don't think we need to make a law that could create loopholes to that.
Oh my God, you just convinced me to ITL this bill. Representative Minor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not certain. Did you just say that recommend this for ITL?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Representative
Yeah.
Gruber. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I totally agree, ITL. This gives in effect more rights to a squirrel and a raccoon than we have a dog.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on from this. I'm done. Okay. Okay. Allowing for the sale of freeze-dried foods produced in homestead food operations. Okay, so here's the deal with this. The amendment is ready. It's upstairs. I just got a thing from OLS. Yeah, if you may. It's 505, HB 505. And it should be up there. So I met with people from food safety Friday and also Monday. And we came up with a plan. And the plan is, I guess I'm going to also talk about the dehydrated meat bill, which is the next bill on our list. Because of the nature of the dehydrated meat, because of meat as being so potentially hazardous, I think that bill should be ITL'd. We're not ready to do anything with that right now, but we've come to the conclusion for at least freeze-dried foods that if and I have language for this, a person can sell freeze-dried food, and that includes vegetables, that includes fruit, that includes processed dairy products like yogurt or ice cream. That what they can do is go through the process of getting a homestead food license, which costs like $150 a year. They would then also take a food safety class, because these foods are also potentially hazardous. And we understand that we're taking a potentially hazardous food and making it into a shelf-stable, freeze-dried product. And that also they should go through a process review so that there's at least some oversight to see that what they're doing it properly. And I don't think that that's really a heavy ask to do for somebody who's going to be doing this and producing these foods. And it also gives a level of protection to the public who's going to be consuming them. So that's where this is. And DHHS was kind enough to provide some language where we would establish this in RSA 143A A-12, section 4, to read that homestead food operations processing and selling freeze-dried foods from the homestead residents. So they don't need a commercial kitchen or anything, just from their homestead residents in their kitchen, at the owner's own farm stand, at farmers markets, and they can also sell their product in retail stores. Not the internet, that's not indicated here. Stores shall be licensed under RSA 143A:4, and for the purposes of this section, freeze-dried food means fruits, vegetables, and commercially prepared dairy products. So it gives them a wide variety of products that they can produce. It gives us some oversight in how that process is done, and also allows them to sell this in retail food stores. So Representative Barber, you had your hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm curious, defining process review. I know that there's a stumbling block to the gentleman who testified regarding freeze drying, where he had to send recipes and all kinds of information, and it cost a tremendous amount of money, and it was very cumbersome. So could you just define for me what process review means in this context?
If I may have one of the gals from Food Safety Division clarify that, please. Okay, let's see if we can do this.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. For the record, my name is Michelle Roberge. I'm the Bureau Chief for Public Health Protection within the Division of Public Health Services.
And I'm Erica Davis, the Administrator of the Food Protection Section, Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Public Safety, Public Health.
So happy to answer your question. So a process review helps us understand the process itself is safe in terms of not so that the end product is shelf stable. And typically those processes aren't done at the state. So those are handled, I think there's the two closest to us are at Cornell University and the University of Maine, I believe. And the costs varied between them, but I think it's about, and actually you probably know more than I do.
It does depend on the product and the place that you're having the process evaluation completed. It can be a stumbling block, but it really gives us that understanding of the product and the process to ensure that the final product is at the proper, it has been produced properly to be safe to sell.
And the cost is about 200?
It does depend.
Okay.
It can be Maine can be under 300. There are, Maine and Cornell are not the only two that you can send out to. There are a list of other process reviewers that will evaluate products.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I,
Any other question for them?
not a question, I just wanted to summarize. Again, this was the stumbling block for my constituent who came to testify, and this shut his dreams down. It was the process review, which was a huge issue for him. His testimony is part of the record. I'll take a look and
Okay,
see if I can.
Representative Bixby, I'm sorry, King and then Bixby. I know that we are doing a study committee to look at the process review. So I'm inclined to put that in right now and then come back to it at a later time to revise that. But anyway, Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two quick questions. One question, one statement. Was this bill worked on by the Food Safety Subcommittee at all? Was there, I think we have a Food Safety Subcommittee, right?
We
Did this ever get worked on?
Yeah, we did. We had, we met and we talked about both bills. I had the two amendments and I'm trying to find them here. Oh, here. We had the two amendments and had some discussion on it. You know, came up with some ideas about it, but it wasn't something that the Food Safety Division would have supported.
Mhm.
And this is something that they would support.
Okay, and the reason I ask mainly is because we're waiting on the actual HB 505 amendment, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The only thing I would say to that is that we're supposed to have an exec session on 505 today, and I personally would not feel comfortable voting on that until I think I need to like spend some time on this over the week. I'd like to get because it's not just going to be a comma half sentence change that the amendment, it's going to be like a substantive amendment. And I personally would like it if we'd recess a 505 until next week, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Yeah,
Representative Bixby?
I think that recessing it till next week makes a lot of sense because, well, for all the reasons that Representative King explained. So-
Yep. Okay, well, that's the plan then. Okay. So I do have, thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. So I do have a copy of the amendment. I'm going to send it around and we can. Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Does getting a homestead license trigger a home inspection?
Does getting a homestead license trigger a home inspection? So if you have a homestead license, do you get an inspection? You do? Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. My knowledge was yes, but I didn't want to speak out of turn, so that's for sure. Okay. All right. Well, so again, I think the way we're going to deal with 642, the dehydrated meat bill, is I prefer to ITL that, even though it's my bill. And 505, we have this amendment, and we can think about it over the week. If people have any comments, they can email me. Okay, and now,
So just looking at time,
Yeah.
7:07, how much discussion is that going to take?
no, HB 707, I'll let Representative Potenza tell us what's news on HB 707. That's not something that we are going to exec out today, but I know that the Solid Waste Subcommittee met this morning. So would you like to give us an update on that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to hand over the speaking on this to Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we went through quickly the amendment, and there was a couple things that were not put in correctly from OLS in regards with aquifer language, which will basically change to like drinking water wells in a couple of those places. We discussed, there were questions about page 3 in regards lines 18 through 24 for significant, basically denying a permit for significant history of repeated serious violations. Director Wimsat was kind enough to speak to this. We could modify this a bit, that, look through what is in current rules right now, see where, I still think there's a couple of gaps. I still would like to have something like this in here. It also gives the discretion to the agency, as well. So there's that piece that might change a little bit. If everybody wants me to remove the Ford Act lines 15, 16, 17 from page 3, I will be happy to do so. It's federal law. It shouldn't matter, it being there or not there. So, but if you guys want it removed, if that's the consensus here, I will remove it. And I did want to say, just because I think a point is really important, and I just wanted on the record, the point of mentioning of when the bill was first designed, the point of mentioning the aquifer is really crystal clear. We want to protect it. So, you protect New Hampshire's drinking water by not polluting the same formation where the water originates. That's it. So, but I will make sure that OLS has got it specifically in there with drinking water wells and all of that throughout the bill. But I just wanted that to be on record. That's really important. So everything else in here has been changed from the setback where we talked. There's the map on the table. So the 3,000-foot setback map that we had previously. Here's the new one, which is the 1,500, which opens up the universe more. It basically left about 3,000 left about 43%, I believe, of the state available. Like if we needed to have another landfill, this probably brings it up to maybe closer to 60% or something like that. The Director Wimsatt could speak to that possibly, but there's a lot more white space here. So that's good to know. And other than that, all of the issues where it was more restrictive with it being 10 miles from Superfund, all of those things have been removed. Descriptions have been changed just so that they match exactly what the bill is speaking to. And I will bring these minor changes to OLS today and have them fix that and get this back out to all of you. And of course, if there's anything else here that you're thinking that we should discuss in changing, speak now or forever.
Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to let the committee know that the Solid Waste Subcommittee's views on this bill are not unanimous. Hope I'm not throwing Representative Scully under the bus, but I think he generally opposes the bill from what I can understand. And I mention that partly because there's talk that we may try and get this bill into the HB2, and that we might have like a committee letter to do that. But I think it's important to respect the thoughts and opinions of all the committee members, and that we might not have unanimous consent as far as that is concerned. So it maybe he would like to speak on that, but I just wanted to mention that.
Representative Scully.
Well, since my name was mentioned, I will tell you I'm actually much more comfortable with this version of the bill than I was with the original one that had so many restrictions. My great concern is that we're going to, without fully thinking of the implications, create restrictions that will ultimately shoot us in the foot down the road when it comes time to actually put a landfill in, especially if you found one that met what I hope to be past our new beneficial use evaluation. And so the fewer restrictions we put in here categorically, the more comfortable I am with this. For instance, the 5-year travel time, very comfortable with that. The arbitrary setback, I still have to get my head around to say whether we ought to be doing both if we have a good functional, requirement saying in terms of 5-year travel time for anything that might escape a landfill. I did think that section 24, which is on page 3, I felt the language was very vague, and it sounds like we have the functional equivalence of that already in rules. I think we ought to consider just dropping that because it sounds like it's already covered. I actually had one other question for the director. I don't know if it's appropriate for us to ask this.
Sure, if you have a question for the director and he's here,
Okay.
please ask him your question.
Well, thank you.
And thank you, Director
Madam Chair.
Wimsatt.
Yeah. Thank you. So Representative Potenza has a provision in here to have 24/7 coverage at the landfill, and she has cited that there's been actual releases that occurred because the monitoring system has failed. Is this a reasonable requirement to put in for any future landfill, installations here in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I think that, thank you for the question. Mike Wimsatt, for the record, Director of the Waste Management Division for New Hampshire DES. I think I did speak to this earlier, and I believe what I said was that we believe that at the agency that actually the resources that would be required to do that would be better spent on electronic and automated alarms that would ensure that a responsible party, or a person on call, what have you, would be notified and could come to the facility. And the reason for that is that, and again, I think in many respects it'd be more appropriate for the regulated community to respond to this as well. But it strikes us there's a lot of costs associated with keeping someone at a facility 24/7. It is not clear to us that that would necessarily result, unless that person were particularly knowledgeable about the operation of the landfill, and more likely it would be like a security guard, that they wouldn't necessarily know that something was wrong. And so we're just not convinced that that's maybe the best way to use the resources to ensure that a release or some kind of a problem or incident at a landfill is detected.
May I ask a follow-up to?
You may ask a follow-up, but I also want to interject something. I've been to, this past week, the folks for the New Hampshire Clean Water had an event, a breakfast, and they were talking about credible and real threats to these different installations, not only water places, but certainly other facilities that use software or electronic means to monitor these kinds of things, and how those facilities can be hacked into by anybody who is looking to seek to make damage to these areas. So I can appreciate having a person on site to actually monitor things as opposed to letting it be monitored remotely or whatever, which can be hacked into. So go ahead, Representative Scully. That's kind of my thought behind this too.
Okay, well, a good point, because I was going to ask if you were suggesting or recommending that we rely on the technology for remote monitoring. Is there some way to significantly strengthen and tighten this up so the possibilities of a problem could be minimized?
We actually did address that in our most recent rulemaking, in which we made specific requirements associated with automated dialers that would continue to dial responsible facility personnel every 10 minutes until they were responsive.
Okay, Representative Bixby, and then I'm going to come back here.
So I'd be comfortable not having someone actually on site 24/7 as long as there is someone who is essentially on call 24/7 that could quickly respond to an automated alert system that is appropriately hardened to not be sort of generally available on the internet, et cetera.
Sure. You and then Gruber. And then down that way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question, and I'm not sure if this is for you, Director, or for someone on the committee here. But on page 2, line 20, all throughout the bill, we talk about the 5-year distance of travel, except on line 20, it's or 1,500 feet. Now, why are we doing that, and what is the importance of that? Because if the 5-year distance of travel is really what we're relying on for everything, why do we have that?
You want to answer that, Representative Potenza?
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. So, the need for a combination of basically travel time and some kind of distance based, like minimal setback in a sense, is because if there is a catastrophic surface spill, then you really don't want to be so close to like a lake or a river or something like that. So that's the reason why you have both. Both are in rules right now, and it needs to be longer. So you just have to make sure that if it flows right into the ground and above ground, that it's not going right down to where it should be. So
Representative
that's why you have both.
Thank you for that. And what is the current distance right now?
500.
Thank you. So did I say someone else here? Gruber, yeah, Representative Gruber, and then over to this end.
Great. I have,
Oh, Minor?
No, the time is past. I just have two items. One for thank you for being here, Commissioner. Do you believe you referred to this staffing on site 24 hours a day? I'm leaning towards the same point that there should be technology and 24-hour coverage with backup power, whatever it is, with today's technology that it can't be easily violated. Do you think that a off-site person with the technology could provide equal or better security for an event to be identified in a timely manner?
Well, I think as I've testified, we think that the resources going towards a robust system of electronic and notification, systems is probably the most helpful. Going to the note that was made before by, I think, Representative Bixby about having a person designated as on call. I suspect that facilities are essentially doing that most of our major facilities would have a person who is expected to be ready to respond if there's an after-hours incident. And certainly, to the extent that they don't have that, they should. So if that were something that that the committee wanted to put into the bill, I think that might make some sense. I don't think our rules specifically address that topic
My
at
follow-up
present.
question
Sure.
was for this page 3, lines 18 through 24. We're talking about the information provided for what we have in rules right now. Would Representative Potenza, would that be basically meet your needs? I think it would meet my needs if we looked at it, because there seem to be fairly robust rules on that are in place for lines 18 to 24 on page 3 regarding who the individual organization characters.
Can you tell me the lines again?
Page 3, it's regarding the issue of the history of, make certain that who runs these facilities has the proper, they don't have a record that's inappropriate for who should be running these important
Yeah,
facilities.
line 18.
Line 18, 18 through 24 on page 3.
So you're saying
that section.
you're saying ix the whole thing.
Well, no, I'm not saying nix it, but look at what we have for language all right now,
Yes,
and
I will
modify it
definitely do
slightly
that.
if necessary, but not.
Yeah, we
start
talked about that in
anew.
the
Is that okay with you?
subcommittee.
Okay.
Would you be willing to have that conversation with me?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
I want to go back to the page 3 about having a person contracted. We have all of the technology in the world that having in rules right now, all of the monitoring systems, which, all of that, that's already in place. I get that. But there's nothing that's a fail-safe for someone being there, eyes and ears, and hearing it. And so I understand there could be an on-call person that obviously would have to be close by or something like that. But we're talking about a private facility that makes this is $1 billion, one of them that's in Rochester, it's $1 billion or more company to require to have one person there on staff to be monitoring and all of the electronic that's already in place. I don't get that, especially with the level of, just in the last week, the level of infiltration that has happened to some of the highest tech companies right now that's going on, from hacking to all of that. Where do you want to create havoc? Water, waste. What you could do to something is unbelievable. And technology is all fine and dandy, and we're going to have all of that. I argue that this is, in here. If the entire committee is against it, I will pull it. That's fine. I'm going to go with consensus, but I don't know why we're looking to save money for a very profitable industry.
Representative Wheeler, I'm going to work my way up this way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to concur with what Representative Potenza said, if organizations, businesses like Sony or Enron or Exxon, or these big oil industries, these big, very well-funded, almost trillion-dollar industries, billion-dollar companies can get hacked and have their systems hacked in a way that releases all the data of everyone in the country or significant information about critical resources in our country. All this is happening right now. If those things can happen, and if the United States government, the federal government of the United States of America, can get hacked, then I think that these companies can get hacked too. And I don't know if there is, to answer Representative Scully's question from a few minutes ago, a fail-safe for technology. And as Representative Potenza said, you can't beat the eyes and the ears of being there on the ground, listening, seeing, and actually getting to interact with the facility. And given the fact that this is a company that I think could afford these fail-safes, it should be something that the legislature moves on forward to say that this is something somebody should be at the facility watching it so that we can actually know and see and hear what's going on at that facility. That makes complete sense to me.
Okay, Representative Germana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'll just say real quickly, kind of one of the favorite sayings of our former colleague on this committee, Representative Murray, was belts and suspenders, right? That you have two systems of protection. And this goes both for the setback distance, there's travel time, and there's also the 1,500 feet. And Representative Potenza spoke to that well. If you have a massive surface spill, you want to make sure that you're not so close to a body of water, surface speed being different and faster than subsurface speed. So that's a second, 2 layers of protection. I think that's a good thing. And likewise with this question about monitoring in person and monitoring with technology, I think we needed both. The most important safety systems we have when we're talking about transportation, for example, incorporate both human oversight and electronic monitoring. And I think that is exactly the measure of safety we should be insisting on here.
Representative Bixby.
Okay, I have 2 points. One is a practical point. One is just I'd like to concur with what Representative Germana just said. I am happy to go with having that someone on site all the time. I think that it's not a particularly big ask for a company of the size that would be running the landfill. The other thing is I would like to ask Representative Potenza to have OLS provide a due date for OLS that is soon enough so that you can then distribute the whole, the revised amendment to the committee, so we have a couple of days to look it over. Thank you.
Representative Scully? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Representative King first, and
Pardon
then
me. Go
Representative
ahead.
Scully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to piggyback on what Representatives Wheeler, Germana, and Bixby said. I too agree that it's good to have somebody on site. You know, corporations will often employ security guards to guard like light bulbs that are just sitting there and do nothing. So if these companies can hire security guards to protect something that's inert, then we should also be demanding protection for something that could potentially ruin the environment. And the thing is that the cost of this employee is going to be passed on to the consumers. And I think it's important that that actually happens. That's a good thing, because when municipalities are determining how to dispose of their waste, they need to take into account all of the costs of their waste. And the thing is that for too long, we've been able to basically just cut the cost of the waste at the expense of the environment. And I don't like that. I think that, you know, it's like when you buy a product, you're buying a something that's wrapped in plastic, and it's like, okay, you've paid for the cost of the product, but you haven't yet paid for the cost of the disposal of the product. And I think it's important that all the true costs, the true charges that would add up to disposal are in there. And if this is another charge that's going to be added on to municipalities, my hope is that eventually municipalities are going to say, you know what, the cost of disposing things in the ground is more than some other method, like, for example, waste to energy incineration plants, or maybe even shipping it to a location that's not as environmentally hazardous as it is here. So for me, I'm in no way, shape, or form liking the idea of trying to cut costs for landfills. I think we need to jack those costs up to infinity. Thank you.
Representative Scully?
I guess I would just point out that I understand people's concerns about remote hacking, but if you've got like a simple sump system that has a monitor that tells you when a level's been reached in a tank, you can set that system up such that your safety equipment is not, you cannot change what it does remotely. What we're really talking about is whether an alarm is struck, a level is reached, and that message is then sent remotely to somebody else. So, I mean, I guess you could think of North Korean hackers coming in and saying, we're going to keep somebody from getting that, you know, alarm that the level has been reached. But the systems themselves can be set up such that they're a closed system, there's a firewall there, and you can't go in and hack those things to stop their safety functions from occurring.
Representative Potenza, did you guys have anything? All right, Representative Potenza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My last point on this, because I think we've really gone around and around, is this. So the security piece that was just mentioned, that right there alone is the reason why someone should be there all of the time. A person should be there all of the time on site. It is very easy, especially with a landfill like we have in Rochester, which is the largest in the state, for someone to come in and set it on fire. So just so you know, that's very easy to do. So we've got gases that are coming out and all of that kind of stuff. So if you just look at that piece and that piece alone for security, that's huge. I mean, everything's posted all over that property. You can very easily, there's lots of hazardous, materials and stuff like that are there. I'm not talking about hazardous waste. I'm talking about materials and places like that, just for security reasons alone, there should be somebody there. Not even talking about when, about releases or something catastrophic that could happen to the environment.
Okay, thank you. I think we've pretty much ended discussion on HB 707. I've just passed out a proposed House resolution. This is in response to the meat slaughter bill. And thank you, Director Wimsatt, for taking our questions. So the meat slaughter bill, which we retained, Representative Bixby and
I just have a question. Could we perhaps recess the work session and go to caucus for 5 minutes to figure out what we're doing, and then take up the resolution after the exec session, because we're running like about.
well,
half an hour behind.
I wanted to just explain this before we go to caucus.
Okay, fair enough.
And I think we're pretty much done with our work session, so I don't know that we need to recess that. This proposed House resolution, I wanted to explain it to you before we go into a caucus, before we exec some bills out. Because of, we retained that meat slaughter bill, and we wanted to have a House resolution, much like the House resolution that was presented by Ways and Means last Thursday on the House floor. What I was told by Clerk Paul Smith was that if we, as a committee, vote on this proposed House resolution and we agree on it, that then we can take this language to OLS, have it drafted, and bring it to the House floor, just like Ways and Means did with their revenue estimates. So I'm worked on, Representative Bixby took language that we had from Farm Bureau, and because Farm Bureau gave us the House resolution, Representative Bixby pared it down, and then I met with Farm Bureau yesterday, and they had a couple other changes. So this is the end document, basically urging our federal delegation to sponsor legislation, and also urging the United States Department of Agriculture to adopt regulations allowing for small-scale slaughter plants to use the Federal Meat Inspection Act's custom-exempt meat processing inspection criteria with a third-party inspector present at slaughter so that processed beef, pork, lamb, and chevron, goat meat, can be sold as individual cuts directly from the farm producer to the end consumer. This was HB... Thank you. Yes. So that's what this House resolution is, and I hope that when we finish executing our bills, we will, I would like to vote on this House resolution as a committee, and I hope that you will support it. So with that, I'm going to adjourn our work session. Let's meet for caucus for about 10 or 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Yeah, quarter of, we'll be back here, and then we can take up execing the bills that we have on our list to exec today.
overnight got very sick and had a fever and
Oh.
didn't sleep. It just hit her overnight.
I hope she feels better soon. Okay, I'm going to open up our exec sessions this afternoon. Sorry we're late. We're running late on this. We will start with HB 424, directing the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food to create forms for businesses to request information about service animals and establishing a committee to study the protection of business owners from requests to accommodate customers with fraudulent or untrained service animals. Phew. Do I hear a motion? Representative Howard.
I move ITL on HB 424.
And do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Representative Freeman. Representative Howard, would you like to speak to your motion?
We've discussed it at almost great enough length. I just think that it's an unnecessary bill because our hands are tied by the federal ADA laws.
Thank you. Any other discussion about this bill? Seeing none, I request the clerk to call the roll on ITL motion for HB 424.
Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby,
Yes.
Representative Germana,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler, Representative Gruber,
Yes.
Chairwoman Aaron.
Yes,
Motion passes 14-0.
thank you. Going to close the exec on HB 424.
Consent calendar.
Oh, yes. Shall we put this
Yes,
on the
please.
consent calendar? Yes, thank you. Close the exec on HB 424. I will open up the exec session for HB 401 relative to animal testing funded by New Hampshire state funds.
262.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong thing here. 262. Well, we have HB. I'm sorry. We have HB 250. I'm going to open up the exec session for HB 250, and I'm going to suggest that we recess this till next week, pending updated amendment to that bill, and we will recess that to, I guess, what would be, March 18th, 10:30, right after we get back from, I guess 10:30.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? We should have a work session first, so on the four bills, and then have a caucus. So let's call it 11:15.
Okay. Did you get in touch with CSG about them potentially
Yes.
presenting?
And they would be coming to speak with us around 11:30.
Okay.
So we'll have like 15 minutes to exec four bills.
Okay.
So let's say 11:15 on March 18th. Okay, moving right along. HB 262, which is relative to group license for dogs. Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move ITL on that.
Do I hear a second?
I'd like to
Representative
second
Comtois?
that.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Bixby, would you like to speak to your motion?
Okay, I pretty much said what needed to be said in the work session, so I think we can just vote.
Okay, I request the clerk to call the roll on the motion of ITL for HB 262.
Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman.
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby,
Yes.
Representative Germana,
Yes.
Representative Haskins. Oh, my apologies. Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
Representative Gruber,
Yes.
Chairwoman Aaron.
Yes.
14-0, motion passes.
Should that be on consent?
Yes, please.
All right. We're good with that? All right, I closed the exec session for HB 262. And move along to open the exec session for HB 401 relative to animal testing funded by New Hampshire state funds. Do I hear a motion for that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move to ITL or an expedient to legislate on House Bill 401.
Thank you, Representative Freeman. Do I hear a second?
Second, Madam Chair.
Representative Germana seconds. And Representative Freeman, would you like to speak to your motion?
Short and sweet, essentially, this bill is a solution searching for a problem. New Hampshire currently only has one in-state cosmetics company who voluntarily doesn't test on animals. And finally, our in-state universities must comply with federal guidelines pertaining to any animal testing or research. So for those reasons, I feel that this bill is unnecessary.
Is there any further comment? Seeing none, I'd like to have the clerk call the roll on ITL motion for HB 401.
Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman,
Yes.
clerk votes yes. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby,
Yes.
Representative Germana,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
Representative Gruber,
Yes.
Chairwoman Aaron.
Yes.
14-0, motion passes.
Shall that be placed on consent?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to close the exec session for HB 401. I'm going to open up the exec session for HB 505, and I would like to, I'd like to recess this bill again. This is the allowing for the sale of freeze-dried foods produced in homestead food operations. We have an amendment pending, which is not ready for today. And so I'd like to recess this exec session for March 18th at 11:15 a.m. And I'm going to close the that HB 505 and move on to HB 642, allowing the sale of dehydrated meat without a homestead food license. And I would like to move ITL on that. Do I hear a second? Representative Howard seconds, and I'll speak to my motion. In speaking with both the Food Safety Subcommittee and what we wanted to do, and in conjunction with my conversations with Food Safety Division and the HHS, I believe that more thought needs to be put into introducing this type of meat product into homestead food sales. Meat is a very different product than some of the other things that we've discussed. It is a potentially hazardous food. Handling of meat is nothing to be taken lightly. And I think, since this is even my bill, I'd like to think more thoroughly on how this type of potentially hazardous food can be produced and sold with just a little bit more oversight, and in this manner anyway. So that is my reasoning for wanting to ITL this bill. Is there any other further comment or discussion on this? Seeing none, I would like the clerk to call the roll on the ITL motion for HB 642.
Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman,
Yes.
clerk votes yes. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby,
Yes.
Representative Germana,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
Representative Gruber,
Yes.
Chairwoman Aaron.
Yes.
14-0, motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And you want to put that on consent?
Yes, please.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to close the exec session for HB 642 and open up the exec session for HB 251, allowing the ownership of certain squirrels and raccoons. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that this
Representative Scully.
bill be voted on as inexpedient to legislate.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Representative Bixby, seconds. Representative Scully, would you like to speak to your motion?
Well, I think this bill is very well-meaning, but based on the expert testimony of our fish and wildlife individuals, these are wild animals. There is no established vaccine schedule, which heightens the danger of trying to keep them as pets, and therefore we believe that this would be an unsafe thing to allow people to do. So I say that this should be inexpedient to legislate.
Any further question? Oh, Representative King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to be voting no against the motion. There's two main reasons why people have a problem with this bill, and that is that it would be dangerous to humans or it would be unethical for animals. I think both of those arguments fall flat because while squirrels and raccoons may bite, so do dogs, and people get killed from dogs all the time. We don't ban them. Furthermore, while those may be wildlife, actually all animals are wildlife, and we also have a lot of animals that probably would prefer to stay wild, such as birds that we cage. So all of the animals that I think there are a lot of animals that we do allow that. So if we do allow those animals, I think we should also allow raccoons and squirrels. And then the last argument as well, there's no vaccine schedule. Well, there's no vaccine schedule because they're banned. They're just not allowed. If we allowed them, then there would be a vaccine schedule. So I think if you go through each one of the arguments against, you could systematically defeat them with basic logic. So that's why I'm going to be voting against the motion. But I'm fine with it going on consent calendar once it gets defeated. Thank you.
Representative Bixby.
Yeah, in addition to all the excellent reasons that Representative Freeman cited, sorry, Representative Scully cited, also there is existing in fish and game laws a mechanism for permitting in the small number of cases where it might be relevant.
Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Representative King outlaid I think Representative King handled it well. I just believe that this is sort of, it's a silly bill both ways, however you look at it. And I think I'll be voting in favor of allowing people to own squirrels because it's not significantly enough dangerous for me to say that the state should ban the use of them. Would I say, go out there and own a squirrel? No, but it's also not for me to say, and I think somebody has the right, if they come into the state having owned a squirrel, to own that squirrel. And from a more funnier perspective, I think of that squirrel that died last year, Peanut, and, you know, the state of New Hampshire doesn't want to get itself in any peanut scandals, but.
Thank you. Any other comment or question? Seeing none, I ask the clerk to call the roll on ITL motion for HB 251.
Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman,
Yes.
clerk votes no. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby,
Yes.
Representative Germana,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yeah, no.
Representative Gruber,
Yes.
Chairwoman Aaron.
On ITL, yes.
Motion passes 12-2.
Can we put this on the consent calendar?
You're fine with
Okay.
that? Okay,
All right.
I'm fine with it too.
Is there a minority report? Anybody interested in writing
There
one?
can't be a minority
No?
report if
Oh,
it's on consent.
Yeah, never mind. Okay. All right, I'm going to close the hearing for HB 251 and open up the hearing, the exec. Open up the exec for HB 152 prohibiting the sale and use of adhesive-based rodent traps. I am going to move ITL on this bill. And do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Oh, Representative Freeman?
I'll second
You
that, Madam
wanted to
Chair.
second that, okay. Sorry. Okay, and I will speak to my motion. Rodent and rodent infestation is a problem. Rodents carry diseases like black plague. And in the interest of public health, I will side with the health of human beings and support the use of all non-chemical means to eliminate problematic rodents. Any way that you kill a rodent is going to be considered cruel. And I saw that testimony for the use of glue traps, that is an effective way to monitor and capture rodents. You also cannot control where people purchase glue traps. It would be simple for people to buy them over the internet or go to a neighboring state. There are instructions on the packages on how to properly use these products. And I think we need certainly a lot more public education on that, so that non-target species are not being captured. But in the end, I am very strongly against banning any kind of non-chemical means to control the rodent population. Do I hear Representative Wheeler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to vote against the ITL motion on this legislation, but I do just want to say, in case this gets brought back, that it should not be under the Department of Agriculture. The commissioner asked us to not have the enforcement be under his department, as it doesn't land there. And I think there are just some serious structural problems with the legislation that could be fixed if a little bit more work was put into it. So that's for the camera. Representative Haskins, if she's at home, if you want to put that work into the legislation, then I think that would make it a little bit more amenable to people. But I am going to vote with the caucus on this one.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As someone, as I seconded this bill, I just wanted to point something out that's come to light. Recently, Gene Hackman's wife was found in her house, and her cause of death was hantavirus. And hantavirus is a rare but lethal disease that rats carry, only rats. So I'd like to point out that while those instances of hantavirus may be rare, it's still lethal. And if someone is dealing with a rodent problem and we limit what they can do in order to exterminate those rodents, then we are exposing the public to some health risks.
And I believe they did have a rodent problem on their property. So, yeah. Representative Germana?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would have liked to, if we had actually worked on amendment, I realized that we understood where the lines were drawn, so it wouldn't have gotten us any closer. I still would have liked that amendment. We do, in fact, have ways of regulating sales in state, and there are ways to mark certain products as not for sale in certain states, even when it comes to purchasing them online. We heard from some folks that some desire for us to find some kind of compromise because clearly there is enough interest in this among our constituents that the bill is going to come back. And we had a representative of the pest control industry. Well, but he urged us to work towards some type of compromise. In any event, I think there are many non-chemical options that are both less cruel and have much less potential to have harmful impacts on other animals. So I'll be voting against the ITL.
Yeah, I would also remind people too that, these glue traps are used to control pests like cockroaches and other insects. And while this bans them for the use of rodents, glue boards, I don't know how you can enforce using it for one pest population versus another. So with that, if there's no other further conversation, I would ask the clerk to call the roll on the ITL motion of HB 152.
Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman,
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby,
No.
Representative Germana,
No.
Representative Howard,
No.
Representative Wheeler,
Reluctant no.
Representative Gruber,
No.
Chairwoman Aaron.
Yes on ITL.
9-5, motion passes.
Okay, I will be writing the majority report. Who would like to write the minority report? Germana? Okay, I'm gonna close the exec session on HB 152. Again, we had two of our bills that we had on our docket today, that have been recessed for next week. We will have then 4 bills to vote on next week, and that will be the end of what is on our plate. Please get your committee reports into me as soon as possible. And I want to thank everybody. Oh, yeah, we've got this, I'm sorry, before we take off. We've got this House resolution to vote on. I hope everybody had a moment to read it. And I would entertain any discussion about it. Representative Bixby.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that I think this makes a lot of sense. It's a little bit longer than my revision of it, but I think that the changes are fine in terms of, I wasn't aware that there might be political problems by mentioning the Prime Act. The Farm Bureau was aware of that, so they asked to not have that language in here. Their language is a little bit more specific in terms of how it might work. I'm fine with that. And Representative Aaron added in that we would be making the ask of both the federal delegation and also the USDA. The USDA can't do anything in terms of regulations unless there's a change in statute. So we need to have both of those parties be involved in it. And I think that the list of whereases is sufficiently short, but also sufficiently comprehensive to cover the reasons that this resolution makes sense.
Okay, so I guess we have to have a motion for ought to pass on this? Is that how? I don't know.
Yeah, I can move on to pass.
Okay, I second.
Wouldn't it be a motion for adoption? Or
Adoption?
maybe it is adoption.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, motion for adoption.
Motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt House Resolution. I second it. If there's any other discussion on this at all? No, seeing none. Do we have the clerk call the roll or just, how do you want to do that? We could do a voice vote if that's, yeah.
I'd rather do a voice vote because if Paul says that we should have done a voice, I would rather do a roll call because if Paul says we should have done a roll call, then I don't want to have to come back and.
Okay, correct. All right, so I don't know, I guess you can use one of your forms to do that?
Yeah.
Just do a roll call vote and we'll figure it
I
out.
suppose I can fill in whatever I want. So this House resolution doesn't have any number, does
on
it?
Right.
Okay, so I'll just put that blank and then I can always fill it in later.
Right.
Something else. Okay, Vice Chairwoman Comtois,
Yes.
Representative Kenny,
Yes.
Representative Potenza,
Yes.
Representative Freeman,
Yes.
Clerk votes yes. Representative Scully,
Yes.
Representative Barber,
Yes.
Representative Minor,
Yes.
Ranking Member Bixby, Representative Germana,
Yes.
Representative Howard,
Yes.
Representative Wheeler,
Yay.
Representative Gruber,
Yes.
Chairwoman Aaron.
Yes,
Motion passes 14-0.
okay, super. All right, I guess that's it for today, and I want to remind everybody, we have been invited on Tuesday morning next week on the 18th to yeah, breakfast. Let me just pull this up on my phone here. This is the Young Farmers Breakfast from Farm Bureau from 8 to 10 a.m. at Sunnycrest Farm, 59 High Range Road, Londonderry. Yep, 59 High Ridge. I will send out a reminder to everybody. It is indoors. And so we'll see you all then. And then the plan is to have a work session on the 4 bills that are remaining, have a quick caucus, and then vote on those 4 bills. In the meantime, I will be working with Chairman Weiler on the language that's in the trailer bill to pull that language out and submit our suggestion for the three bills that will take its place. And that's it.
Just for clarity, that's going to be in consultation with the governor's office, which is still in
Yes.
process.
Yes.
One quick question on the 3 bills. That would be HB 171.
HB 215 and HB 707.
And what about the leachate plant? HB
No, that's
566?
not going to be
That's not
included.
part- Okay, thanks.
Doesn't need to be.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, we are convened. Thank you so much. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye. See you. Okay. Thank you, thank you.
You had an extra resolution here. I took it for the
Yep,
minutes.
yep. Oh, where did Rob?
It's amazing. Bye, Kelly girl.
Miller, I wanted to see you get up there and give a moment of silence for Peanut the squirrel.
I almost did. I didn't want to be too disrespectful to the bill.
Okay,